Welcome everybody to History Lessons. I'm your host, the journalist Sin-seer, and tonight we have a very special guest, Bobby Fine, aka B Fine. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hey, I'm here.
No doubt, we're going to take it back a little bit, work our way up to what B Fine has going on in 2024. But before we do all that, just basically, how are you doing? How's everything going with your life right now? What have you been up to?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. All things considered, uh, I've been kind of going through this creative phase right now. You know, writing, drawing, music. So it's a cool time. It's a really cool time right about now. But no complaints. I'm in good health. Family's good. Kids are good. Grandbabies are good. I can't complain.
Absolutely. So let's take it back. Be fine. Just take us back to where you were born and raised and a little bit of your upbringing.
Man, I was born and raised in Neptune. I was born in Neptune, New Jersey. Raised in a town called East Windsor, Hikestown. They kind of border each other. Went to grammar school in East Windsor. Went to high school in Hikestown. It's kind of central Jersey. Exited off the turnpike. An hour from New York, an hour from Philadelphia, kind of the middle point. So it's a great place to grow up because you got the best of both worlds. You could be in New York one weekend and you could be in Philadelphia the next weekend. And everything was real close. DC, Virginia, so it was a really cool upbringing. I grew up a suburban kid, but not very not didn't have very many resources growing up. It was me and my four brothers. We had two sisters that were in and out during in the summertime. So it was a lot of us in the two in the one. It was technically a one bedroom with a den, but we made it look like a two bedroom. So
Right.
so yeah, we grew up kind of sharing clothes and sharing food and this regular struggle that everybody else kind of goes through. But luckily we did it, and my mom had us in the suburbs when we were doing it growing up, and so we had a very well-rounded upbringing, going to bar mitzvahs, and I had Jewish friends, I had Indian friends, I had black friends, I had everybody, I had all kind of friends growing up, so it was really really cool.
Kind of hobbies and interests did you have early on throughout your teenage years?
Man, when I was in junior high school, when I was in grammar school, I wanted to be an artist. I knew that from like second, third grade. I wanted to be like some kind of a graphic designer or engineer. Initially, it was an engineer. I just heard that big word and thought that that was super important. And then as I kind of got a little bit older, like in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, I wanted to be a graphic designer. So I was really an artist before I became a recording artist. But then when I heard Sugar Hill Gang, I think it was like when I was in fourth or fifth grade, I started writing songs and poems and stuff like that, and then that's when the music kind of took over. But I was always an artistic kid, never really into sports too much. Played every sports, but didn't like to watch sports or go to sporting events. I think I ran track. I ran track eighth grade and ninth grade. Played soccer a little bit, played tennis a little bit, but I wasn't really the athlete kid growing up. I was more on the art side.
So, talk a little bit about your musical influences earlier on.
Man, music wise, um, shoot, I mean, as far back as I was just talking about Mr. Magic and how his shows used to end, uh, that big radio station WBLS back in the day. Um, so I grew up listening to a little bit of everything. Um, and the town that I grew up in, the bus ride to school, they played classic rock. By the time we would get to school, we'd be playing, Sugar Hill Gang and Curtis Blow and all of the classics. And then we go to music class, and we would literally be doing like orchestra music and singing opera music in class. So it was like I had a nice little plethora of different musical influences. And my mom, of course, on the weekends we'd be cleaning and she'd be playing Marvin Gaye and you know everybody from Spinners. So I had a nice upbringing as far as musical influence. As far as hip hop is concerned, the area that I grew up in was very close to Trenton, so I grew up worshiping a lot of the big Trenton artists like Force and Almighty and Katie Ranks, and of course Poor Righteous Teachers. Wise Intelligence is probably one of my top five MCs to this day. Him and YZ. So I grew up kind of listening to those guys before I started really fanning out over the guys from New York because those guys were right in my backyard. You know what I mean?
Right. What do you remember most about that scene in Jersey early on? You're a teenager, you kind of getting out there. What were you witnessing with some of those MCs firsthand?
Well, my one of my very first experiences when I was probably around 14 or 15, YZ used to bring me to Tony D's house, and Tony D produced Porridge's Teachers and King's Son, YZ, and did a lot of my stuff when I got my deals. But before I got my deals, when I was just a young kid, and Z used to just bring me around Tony. Tone used to be like the DJ. He was the resident DJ for all the parties in Trenton and Ewing back in the mid 80s, going into the 90s. So I remember vividly, like when I was probably about 15, going to, and I wasn't even supposed to be out, snuck out. Z took me to this party in I think it was in Ewing, and Tone was DJing. I didn't know what Tone looked like. I just heard about him. So it was like I remember going to like this smoky club, and it was just this knuckleheads and b-boys, and it was real dark, and it was this white dude behind the turntables, and he was just, I mean, the place was, it was like a movie scene. It was like a straight out of a movie scene, and I was like that, and Z was like, "That's Tony," and I was like, "Holy shit, that's Tony D," and he was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and I just remember going to those parties, those um those Lawrence Center parties, and hip hop was such a big deal in Jersey, especially in that area coming up in those days. So I just remember being like a fly on the wall most of the time growing up until I started kind of doing my own thing, and really being at Trenton War Memorial, doing shows at the War Memorial with Z. And I remember the first time we did Trenton War Memorial, it was with the Juice Crew. So we were backstage and saw Big Daddy Kane and MC Shan and Coochie Rap, and all of those guys, and Biz Markie. And to this day, I remember we went to the Quaker Bridge Mall and bought these long plaid like sleeping shirts, and had our like socks rolled up with the high top Reeboks. And I promise you, after that show, because this is probably 83, 84, somewhere around there, 85. And that's when Biz started wearing the long uh the long shirts. So it was cool just being like a fly on the wall and being around all those different you know situations.
So how did you meet YZ?
Well, we grew up together. We grew up in East Windsor. He was probably, my apartment was one like right across the street from his. His brother and I, matter of fact, his brother Star's birthday is today. This cat named Young Star. Me and him were super, super close growing up because we were the same age. So he and I got close and started this little posse called the ESD posse, and that was like our little clique of just knuckleheads running around rapping and going to different parties and throughout Jersey. And then Z started doing stuff. Z was a dancer, and he picked up rapping as he, just from going around to different clubs in New York, going to Latin Quarters and all these different clubs in New York. And then he started rapping. And when he started rapping, he kind of recruited us to kind of be his resident like crew. You know what I mean? So even though he's a couple years older than me, in high school we'd hang, but he was more like my brother's age, so he would hang more with my brother. But when I really started getting really good at writing and starting to record songs, he kind of took me under his wing and was like, you need to be with me. So I started writing when he started working on his first album. I helped him write a lot of his first album, and that's kind of where it started.
What do you remember most about that debut album, Sons of the Father, and some of your work going into it?
Oh man, uh, I remember I remember him calling me one morning, and he was like, "Hey, come over to the house. I need your help with something." And I remember kind of going over to his crib, and he's like, "Oh, I'm working on this album." Um, I don't even know if he had a title for it. I just know he was just working, just writing songs. So he's like, "You got anything? You got anything?" And I remember I just reached in my little rap book and pulled out these couple of rhymes I was writing, and it turned out to be In Control of Things. And then I already had two verses, so we wrote the third verse together. And then maybe a few days later, I started writing back again. But I just remember us just going in the studio with Tone, because we used to go to the studio called Epsilon, which is like in Hamilton, which was like that was the spot everybody went to record back in the days. And I just remember just like we had so much fun recording that project. Um, yeah, just taking those, on the weekends we would do shows. You got to figure, I was a 15, 16-year-old kid. My weekends were like in the studio doing shows from probably sophomore year to graduation. That's pretty much how I spent my life. So it was fun being a kid during those days, moving all around and just doing shows and recording, and it was fun.
You talked a little bit about that Juice Crew show. What are some of the other shows that you remember and some moments that you'll never forget?
Oh wow. It's funny because in the 80s, when Z first came out, before his record really kind of hit, we would open up for everybody. We would go back and we would go from New York to Philly. We'd open up for all the big groups, De La Soul, Public Enemy, Jungle Brothers, you name it. We'd open up for them. And then once he found out he had a huge record out here in Houston, um, we started doing shows out here. We came on tour here, I think in 1991, and it was reversed. So all of those groups were kind of opening up for him out here. I remember we had a show one night at this club called the Benz Club with De La Soul, and our trip because they went on before we went on, and I was just like, it was like bizarre world. But I mean, we did shows with pretty much everybody at that time. And I was and like I said, I was still young. This is before I really started recording my own albums, and it was just fun just to be in the mix. And I was like his hype man. So I was always on stage. Whenever you see him, you see me. I'm on his album cover. I'm on the front and the back of the first album cover, and my fingerprints are all over that project.
So, what do you remember most about the reaction when that album hit the streets?
It was just a slow. It was back when it took a couple years for things to kind of really blow up. So on back home, we were still kind of on the grind. But when we came here, everybody was. My DJ actually came to Houston the year before Z came, but before I went on tour with Z. So my DJ's name was Drew. He's from Brooklyn. Drew came out here for the first leg of the tour. I think in '90. I think we came in '91. So Drew came back and he goes, "You're not gonna believe it, but he's like a rap god out there." I was like, "Yeah, whatever." So so it came around to for the next for the next leg of the tour that following year, and Z was like, "Hey, I want you to come. I want you to come with me." And we wound up taking my brother, who was actually going to school in Baltimore at Coppin State, and we kind of drove out there, and he literally dropped out of school and came with us and became our road manager. So we jumped on the train, went out to Houston, stopped in Chicago on the way, did some radio. The whole ride there, his manager and him were saying how huge he was in Houston. And we were just like, okay, we'll see. We'll see what we get there. And we got to this little town that's maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours outside of Houston called Nacogdoches, Texas. And I think like the neighborhood drug dealers who were like rappers picked us up. They had a fleet of like trailblazers or whatever the car was at the time, SUVs. They picked us up in a fleet of those, and I remember they took us to a McDonald's and they just kept telling us, "Man, everybody's ready for this show tonight." We weren't even in Houston yet, so me and my brother were like, "Yeah, okay." I remember we stopped at McDonald's, and I think about it was right around the time when the kids were getting out of school. So 300 kids, buses just started pulling over in this McDonald's. We signed autographs for probably about 2 or 3 hours. And it still didn't really sink in because we just look different. Maybe they just think we look different. Da 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 da. We get to the hotel. They had the whole top floor reserved for us, the presidential suite. And at the time, Z's DJ, this guy named Ja, one of my close friends, um, he goes, "Yeah, I'm telling you, man. Wait till the show. I'm telling you, like Z's huge down here." And we were like, "Yeah, okay." So the promoter comes up and he goes, "Hey, listen, one of y'all needs to come downstairs because people aren't paying no money until they know that YZ's here because they don't think that he's here." I was like, what is he, Elvis? Like people, but they were there, they were like, "One of y'all needs to come down here." And the hotel was like a circular building. So when you came off the elevators, there's nothing but glass for miles. And when we got out that elevator, all you could see through that glass was just a sea of people, as far as you could see. As soon as they saw me and Jai get off the elevator, everybody just ran to the door, and it was probably about 3 or 4 thousand people in this little one horse town that came to see him. And that was the beginning of us coming to Houston in this little one horse town. So by the time we got to Houston, it was that times 20. You know, it was on steroids. So it was a culture shock. I was 17 at the time. It was a coming of age kind of thing too. My brother and I were both really young. I don't even know. But my mom just let us kind of come, just was like, y'all are out of school.
Right.
You don't know what you want to do. James, you just dropped my brother Pum. You just dropped out of school. Y'all do what you got to do. Just be safe. And we came out here and we kind of just grew up. It was like a coming of age story too. You know, it was fun. It was wild.
Right. I was about 16 when that album came out, and I remember
Right.
watching the video Tower with the Power, and
Hmm.
always thinking he was from Houston. Was that video shot in Houston?
Everybody thought we were from Houston because we shot that first video in Houston.
Okay.
And yeah, we shot that in Missouri City. And we actually shot that video. We worked on a pilot for a movie. We did a lot when we were here. We were here for 4 months. The whole time we were here, we did the whole Southwest. We did pretty much everywhere in the Southwest. But while we were here, we were shooting a movie pilot. We were shooting videos. I think we recorded a little bit, but it was crazy.
For you personally, what was the game plan for you? Were you going to be maybe one of his first artists? Were you shopping demos around this time?
I was recording before we left. I just started recording with Tony. Z took me to his house after that Lawrence Center party I told you about when I was 15. Z took me over to Tony's house maybe a few weeks later, introduced me to him. I kind of spit for him. Tony was like, I like what you're doing. So we started working on songs. I think the first song I recorded was him with him was a song called I'm the Principal or something like that. And we did a couple more songs. So I had a few songs that was kind of getting a little local radio buzz, but I hadn't recorded like a full length or hadn't gotten a deal at the time. Um, we Z and I had kind of talked about me being like the next up, but we never had like a game plan together or anything. We just kind of were kind of just, winging it. And then by the time we got back from Houston, we were kind of on shaky terms because we just went through a lot while we were here. I think I turned 18 when I was here. Um, People were pulling us apart, pulling us from different directions, and his manager was really, really shady at the time, and he was doing some shady stuff. So I got into it with his manager, and so it was a lot going on. And so by the time we all got back to Houston, we kind of all separated. My brother and I went one direction, and my brother wound up staying in Houston, and then they went their direction, and that's when Z joined the X Clan. And when he joined X Clan, we kind of went our separate ways for a little while. And then that's when I really started focusing on my career and what I wanted to do. And I got my first deal, which wasn't even a record deal, it was a publishing deal.
Okay. And at that time, you were working with Tony D on that Crusaders for Hip Hop album. Is that
I
correct?
did, I did, I did a few songs on Tony's album. While we were doing Tone's album, I was shopping music. I was flying back and forth from Houston to New York to LA. And then I ended up getting a deal, my first record deal with this company called Poetic Groove, who was actually distributed by Interscope. So they were before Death Row, they were in Death Row's offices before Death Row became Death Row. And the owner was this guy named Jerry Davis, rest in peace, who was the VP for ASCAP before he got that deal with Interscope. So he was actually the one who got me my first publishing deal with Warner Chappell before I got my record deal. And then once I got my publishing deal, he got me a record deal. So yeah, after we came back from Houston, I was on a mission to get signed. That was the priority.
Right. So what eventually happened at Interscope?
Um, I was the last group to sign. They signed Poetess. They signed this group from I think they were from Long Island called Power Rule.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Remember Power Rule?
Yeah, that's my boy.
Yep, they signed them. I think they were from Long Island. They signed Power Rule. They signed Poetess. They signed a few other acts. Um, what's funny is that um, huh?
With Tupac on Interscope early on.
Tupac was on. I think Tupac signed right around the time they lost their distribution deal.
Okay.
Marky Mark was on Interscope. It was a bunch. They had what's that guy Gerardo? They had a lot of pop stuff going on their label. Poetic Groove was more like artsy, creative, positive hip hop backpack stuff. And they really were kind of setting the precedent for labels like Stone Throat and
Mm.
what's the one that Talib and all them were on. They were doing that way before any of them were doing that kind of stuff.
Raucous.
Rockets. So they were doing that in 92, 93. Jerry had that deal. I think he got like $10 million from Interscope for that deal. And they basically when they signed the deal with Death Row, they basically just let him go. And they basically said, and when they literally there's this big rumor that's going around the industry about the role that the big four major labels play into um, the the purchasing of the prison system and how a lot of the major labels were invested in these prison systems, and at that time when the change of the guards happened and the gangster rap music really became popular, that there was these secret meetings going on amongst the label execs saying that they're going to really start pushing the gangster rap heavy, and that was going to help them fill up these prisons, right? And I remember Jerry, the guy who owned Poetic Groove, calling me one day, and he was like, "Hey, listen, they took away my distribution deal, but they let me walk away with the money, but they told me that I can't, they didn't want to distribute any of my product anymore." And literally that next day, Death Row moved into his office. So they went from this positive, you know, hip hop to literally the next day to Death Row.
Wow.
Yeah. And he told me that he went to one of those meetings around that time that they had that change of the guard. And he said he stayed for maybe about 30 minutes. And when they started talking, talking crazy, he wound up leaving. But it's not a coincidence that it played out like that.